Okay, let's talk about fiber. And I mean, really talk about it. Forget everything you thought you knew, about it just being roughage. We're going to go way beyond that today. We're about to uncover how this really misunderstood nutrient is the essential fuel for a kind of forgotten organ inside of you, one that plays a huge role in everything from your immune system to your risk of chronic disease. To really get why fiber is so crucial, we have to look back in time. I mean, way back. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors, they were packing in over 100 grams of fiber every single day. But then, as you can see, with the rise of agriculture, and especially the Industrial Revolution, well, that number just fell off a cliff. Today, most of us are getting a tiny fraction of that, creating what scientists are calling the Great Fiber Gap.
And this fiber gap isn't just some minor dietary footnote. Not at all. There's a growing mountain of evidence that suggests this dramatic shift is a prime suspect behind the explosion of modern health problems. We're talking heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and even certain types of cancer.
So to understand why this gap is so dangerous, we first need to get a handle on what fiber actually is. Because it's not just one thing. It's better to think of fiber as a whole team of specialists, each with a very different and very important job to do. And here is the paradox, the wild thing that makes fiber so important. It's defined by what we can't do with it. Our own digestive enzymes literally can't break it down. So it takes this long journey all the way through our system, completely intact, finally arriving in the large intestine, ready to fulfill its real purpose. So that team has two main players, soluble and insoluble. Soluble fiber is the one that dissolves in water. It forms this gel-like substance that kind of slows down digestion and helps manage things like blood sugar. But crucially, it's also the stuff that gets fermented or eaten by our gut bacteria. Then you have insoluble fiber. Think of it as the system's street sweeper. It doesn't dissolve, it just adds bulk and helps, well, sweep things through. And you find these two types in all sorts of different foods, often together. Think about an apple. The soft, fleshy part inside, that's your soluble fiber. But the skin, the part on the outside, is packed with insoluble fiber. Same goes for things like oatmeal and beans versus whole grains and nuts.
But here's where the story gets really, really interesting. The most important part of fiber's journey begins right where our own digestion ends, in the large intestine. This is where its indigestibility becomes its superpower. Because while that fiber might be useless to us, it's a 5-star gourmet meal for the trillions of microbes living in our gut.
This slide just nails the new way of thinking. We have to stop seeing our colon as just a waste pipe. It's not. It's a high-tech bioreactor, a sophisticated fermentation tank. And the fiber we eat, that's the raw material that fuels this entire internal factory. The process is actually pretty straightforward, but its effects are profound. So first, the fiber arrives. Then, the gut bacteria, using all their specialized little enzymatic tools that we humans just don't have, they get to work breaking it down. This whole process, this fermentation, creates amazing new compounds called metabolites. You can think of them as the valuable finished product coming out of our internal factory.
And among those valuable products, one group is so important, it's a total game changer. These compounds are the real reason our relationship with fiber and our gut bacteria is so absolutely critical for our health.
They're called short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs for short. Now, don't let the name scare you. They're basically just powerful signaling molecules that our body uses for all sorts of things. And the most important one of all, the real VIP of the gut, is a compound called butyrate. Butyrate is an absolute superstar for gut health. It's the primary fuel for the cells lining your colon, literally keeping that gut barrier strong and healthy. It actively fights cancer cells by telling them to self-destruct, and it dials down the kind of chronic, low-grade inflammation that's linked to so many modern diseases. And look, this isn't just some theory from a lab. A massive study, the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, or EPIC, followed 500,000 people. The findings were stunning. The group eating the most fiber had a 40% lower risk of colorectal cancer compared to the group eating the least. 40%, that is a huge, huge number. Now, okay, it sounds like a slam dunk, right? More fiber, less cancer. But as with pretty much everything in nutrition science, the story isn't always quite that simple. There are complexities and even some controversies, and it's really important that we look at the whole picture. Which brings up this critical question. If some fiber is good for you, is more always better for everybody? And the answer, maybe unsurprisingly, is that it really depends on the individual. For example, some researchers have pushed back against this consensus. A review from 2007 basically concluded that a strong case cannot be made for fiber's protective effect. This just highlights that science is a process, right? It's an ongoing debate, and not every single study lines up perfectly. And there are also very specific medical situations where less fiber is what you need. For someone who's in the middle of an acute flare-up of an inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's, a doctor will often prescribe a low-fiber diet. The goal there is just to give the inflamed gut a rest and calm down those painful symptoms. So, with all these complexities in mind, what's the practical takeaway? For the average healthy person, how do we start to bridge this historical fiber gap in our own lives? Well, for the general population, the health authorities have some pretty clear guidelines. The target is around 30 to 35 grams a day for men and about 25 to 32 grams for women. And the simple reality is, the vast majority of people in Western countries aren't getting anywhere close to that number. And this really brings us to the most important point. We have to change how we think about fiber. It is not an optional add-on. It's not a bonus. The evidence is clear. It's a biological necessity. It is the food that nourishes the entire ecosystem inside us, an ecosystem our health completely depends on. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. Our bodies and the microbes inside them co-evolved over millions of years on a high-fiber diet. In just the blink of an eye, evolutionarily speaking, we've stripped that key ingredient from our food supply. What does that massive, modern fiber gap truly mean for our long-term health? It's a question worth asking.